Hello friends, welcome to the lecture on subroutines. Today we are going to learn about how we can use or how we can efficiently reuse the same piece of code over and over again during the course of our Perl program. So in order to understand, we need to understand how we can write subroutines and how we call these subroutines while we write our Perl scripts. So let us first understand what are subroutines. Subroutines are basically functions, reusable functions that we can call during the course of our Perl script. The subroutines in Perl are defined using a keyword sub. So sub says that the name that is followed by the keyword sub would be the name of your subroutine. So let's say I would say sub add. So this add becomes the name of your subroutine, followed by curly braces, and you can write your code here. So I would say hash code goes here. So this is a basic definition of a subroutine. So sub is the keyword that says that this is a subroutine in Perl, and the name of the subroutine is add and followed by the curly braces, and your code goes here. In case you want to pass some arguments to the subroutine, you simply pass the argument as arg1, arg2, so on and so forth. You can have multiple arguments, you can have single argument, you can also have no arguments passed to it. So as of now, we are not going to pass any arguments here, and we will see how we'll construct our first subroutine. So it says this is an add subroutine. So as the name suggests, we will simply go on and add two numbers. So let's say our first number was 10 and our second number is 20, and we'll have a result that is stored in $res, and we're simply going to add these two numbers, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and print the result. Add result. Now let's go ahead and execute this particular piece of code. Okay, so if you see, we have created a subroutine, but we have not received any output. So this is a subroutine that which we have defined. Now we need to call this particular subroutine. So in order to call the subroutine, we just have to mention add, and probably this would solve our purpose. So if we execute, now what we have is add result, that is 30. So this add is actually a subroutine, a reference to a subroutine. So internally, this particular statement, when Perl has seen add as a statement, what it does is it understands that this is a subroutine. It goes ahead and finds for a subroutine, and as it gets a subroutine, it executes this particular piece of code and gives us the output for that particular subroutine. Now there are few things associated with this. Let's say I have defined the subroutine at the end of our program. So for example, my subroutine definition is right here, and I have made a reference to the subroutine, or I have called the subroutine. So this is calling of a subroutine. I've called the subroutine before I have defined the subroutine. So what Perl has given me, and Perl has given me an error saying add is not allowed while strict subs. Okay, execution of subroutine is aborted due to compilation errors. So now Perl is failing to actually recognize what exactly add means here. So what we'll do is, in order to understand that, okay, in order for Perl to understand what exactly add is, we'll call the subroutine with an ampersand sign, and we'll see what exactly happens here. So now you can see this has worked exactly to our previous case where we had got the result as 30. Now why this has happened? So when we say ampersand, so remember friends, we have defined a subroutine, but before we have defined a subroutine, we have actually made a call to that particular subroutine. Now, because that call was there prior to the definition, we need to use an ampersand. There is one more way to get around this ampersand thing. To whatever subroutines you have defined and you have called those subroutines prior to their definitions, prior to the definitions, you have to forward reference a subroutine. So that is, you just have to declare a subroutine. Subroutine add. So sub add. If I write this particular statement, this is called as forward reference, or in simple words, declaration. Subroutine declaration. Now, by doing this, we just don't even need to write an ampersand sign to call a subroutine. Now, if you execute this particular program, you will see we have got the result in the same way that we had got it in our previous way when we used an ampersand sign to call a particular subroutine. So I hope this particular forward reference functionality is pretty much clear. Ideally, or a very proper practice, I would say, is to declare or is to define all your subroutines right at the end of the program. So you have created a space which actually belongs to all the subroutines, and you usually call them or reference these subroutines during the course of program. So whenever you define a subroutine, make sure right at the top you have a definition, or you have a declaration or a forward reference to a subroutine. This is how you just give a declaration to that particular subroutine which you have defined right at the end of your program. This is the way you call your subroutine. In case you miss your forward reference, make sure you always do your calling by using an ampersand sign. But ideally, I would say, to have a subroutine in place in Perl, you should have three things in place. One is the declaration, the second is your definition, and third is calling your subroutine. Remember, these are the most important three statements that you would require whenever you define a subroutine or whenever you work with subroutines in Perl. So I hope the basics of subroutines is pretty clear. Today we have seen how we can actually create a subroutine. After that, how we forward reference a subroutine and how we call a subroutine. We'll discuss more about subroutines in detail in our next lecture. So I'll see you there at the next lecture. Thank you.